We kick things off deep in a murky swamp-like forest where we spot a single-eyed yellow slime, looking more confused than a chameleon in a bag of Skittles. That's because the soul crammed inside this jiggly body vividly remembers being cozy just a day ago deep into a manga. One little nap later, and bam, that was apparently the official goodbye to their entire former life. Now they're reborn as this, and since crying about it won't fix anything if slimes can even cry, the only option left is to figure out how to survive. He even makes an attempt to shout to call for anyone, but again, who knows if a glob of goo even has vocal cords. After a beat, he realizes staying quiet is the smarter play. This whole swamp is giving off some seriously hostile vibes. In the midst of this existential crisis, it finally clicks that he's a slime. But before he can even process that, a system window materializes, ready to answer some burning questions. First up, he's not just any slime. He's a decomposer slime, a glorified trash compactor, to put it bluntly. And because of this, his body is literally eating itself, a condition called autophagy, because he hasn't consumed anything. Naturally, sheer panic kicks in. Where in the world is he supposed to scrounge up some food? But then he remembers his core ability. He can decompose things, and with nothing around but a rotten tree log, he slurps the entire log right into his body. For anyone wondering, our guy reports that it tastes like a soggy biscuit. Not that I'd know what a log tastes like. Anyway, a full 15 minutes later, he finally finishes his woody meal. He skyrockets 2 levels and snags a skill point. Oh, and he also gets the memo that he's maxed out all the EXP he can get from eating wood. Speaking of skills, he immediately juices up the 2 he's got: decomposition and pulsation. Obviously, he immediately goes to test out pulsation since the other one is pretty self-explanatory. The very instant he activates it, the skill auto-levels from 2 to 3. In short, this power, which sounds like something out of biology class, lets him stretch out his body like taffy to survey his surroundings and gather intel. Using this new trick, he starts scouting the area around his log base, and the first thing he hones in on is a mushroom. Now, if a normal person ate that thing, they'd be in for a world of hurt. But since he's a living decomposer, his first thought is lunchtime. Oh, and a fun little factoid, this type of slime is actually real, just, without the video game system. I think I brought that up because this slime can figure out the most efficient path between 2 points, no matter how gnarly the terrain. But I digress. He finally reaches the mushroom, ready to chow down, when suddenly his mind launches a full-blown soap opera. In this bizarre daydream, he makes a dramatic entrance, proclaiming that their fateful meeting was destined. The mushroom then asks if he's a guy named Tough Bang Bang. Don't ask questions, just go with it. Our hero obviously says yes, but the mushroom he's imagining is definitely not what he's seeing. Back in the real world, that thing is lethally poisonous. Realizing his mistake, the slime aborts the mission, tearing off the part of his body touching the fungus. The move costs him half of his max HP. Absolutely furious, he retreats to his log, swearing he'll be back for revenge. After another 15-minute cooldown, the slime is back to full health, and you already know where he's headed. He makes a beeline for that mushroom, but this time the script is flipped. The moment he starts decomposing the fungus, he's back in his imaginary world, but instead of some romantic encounter, our protagonist straight up captures her. In game terms, he successfully breaks down the mushroom and acquires a new skill: poison resistance. The weird part is that he didn't level up, but that's not a huge deal since the area is practically a buffet of weird mushrooms. After gorging on several different types, he finally hits level 5, only to be told he won't get any more EXP from decomposition. For the next 24 hours, too tired to keep wandering, he just scoops up the rest of the mushrooms and starts carrying them with him. He remembered seeing on a nature show that some crabs wear poisonous anemones to scare off anything that wants to eat them. And speaking of predators, our slime runs face first into a swarm of giant bees. They don't last long though, because a massive frog appears and unleashes a devastating tongue lashing. Even as the bees swarm and sting it, the frog just waits for the perfect moment, then zaps, times its tongue out, and swallows the entire swarm in one go. But hey, this is nature, and even frogs have enemies. What I wasn't expecting was a flamingo with a freaking snake tail to swoop in and devour the frog in a single gulp. For a terrifying second, it looks like our little golden slime is next on the menu, but the creature catches a whiff of the poisonous mushrooms and flies off. And honestly, the sheer force from that thing's wings flapping was enough to nearly kill him. A while later, safely back at his log, the grim reality sinks in. He is on the absolute lowest rung of the food chain, which is a pretty crushing realization. He's already leveled up 4 times and he's still just a vulnerable yellow blob. The thought makes him wonder what fresh hell the next few days are going to bring. In that moment, all he wants is to be back in his room, hoping this has all just been one twisted nightmare. The next day, our protagonist wakes up, still a slime, and now he's taking damage. The sudden pain startles him so badly that he leaps up, which somehow unlocks a new skill. When he peeks outside the log, he spots the culprit. A slug is spewing acid all over the mushrooms he'd gathered and wolfing them down. He completely snapped at the slug, branding it a drooling thief, which was fair, since the creature's acid spit was actively melting him. The slug began to tremble, and in that moment our slime realized he might have gone a little overboard. So he nudged one of the mushrooms over to the slug. At the end of the day, they were both low-tier creatures just trying to survive. This act of kindness sent the protagonist spiraling, wondering if this was one of those legendary anime moments where a bitter rivalry blossoms into an unbreakable friendship. He pictured the entire epic saga, the two of them surviving against all odds, becoming a legendary adventuring duo. They might even take down the Demon King together. But that entire daydream was probably just a weird side effect of the mushrooms. When he actually tried to make nice with the slug, the reality was a brutal wake-up call. The slug just started to devour him. It was then our hero remembered a critical fact. Monsters don't operate on feelings. There's only the food chain, and in this matchup, our slime was definitely on the menu. He frantically dumped his points into pulsation and tried to make a break for it. Too bad he was getting outrun by a slug. The slug, having lost all patience, unleashed a torrent of acid that slammed into the slime for a whopping 27 damage, literally splitting him in two. To cheat death, the slime sacrificed half his mass as a decoy and made a desperate escape, but the slug completely ignored the decoy and kept zeroed in on our protagonist. Pushed into a corner, with zero options left, he grabbed a random mushroom and force-fed it directly to the slug. The creature instantly contorted in agony from the poison, and then perished. And for anyone wondering how that worked, the slug had swallowed the mushroom completely raw. Previously, the slug would douse the mushrooms in acid before consumption, which actually canceled out the poison. With the threat handled, the slime crept toward the slug's corpse, imagining the gains he'd get from decomposing it. Of course, he first had to get past the thought of actually eating it, but he'd tried French escargot before, so how bad could it possibly be? Oh, it was bad. He said the texture was like a glob of thick mucus, and it tasted like a mixture of salt and pure sweat. Still, he couldn't just toss out all that precious experience, so he squeezed his non-existent eyes shut and choked it down. After what felt like an eternity, he finally consumed the entire thing. He got the level up but felt sick to his stomach from the repulsive flavor. He was now level 7 with 1 attribute point to spend, but all his skills were passive. He had 0 offensive abilities, which sent him into a silent rage, but there was nothing he could really do about it. His class was, after all, a decomposer slime. Plus, even with attack skills, he'd still get demolished by actual predators. So he decided to put a pin in that problem. Turning his attention back to his skills, he pumped his point into pulsation, bringing it to level 4, and gave it a test drive. He then calculated that he could now move at a blazing 20 centimeters per second, which works out to about 0.78 kilometers per hour. Basically, his top speed was now comparable to an actual amoeba. A week flashed by, and he had managed to devour almost the entire log he had been living on. Knowing that just camping in one spot wouldn't cut it, he resolved to explore the wider area, especially since a week of practice had taught him how to maneuver his new body with more finesse. With this new goal, he began to stretch his body out in all directions like a living radar. It functioned almost like a search spell, only he was using himself to do the searching. Whenever he detected a mushroom, he would just absorb it from a distance. During this sweep, however, he stumbled upon another slug, which promptly tore off a piece of his body. This slug also spat a glob of acid, but this time our slime was faster and managed to dodge the attack. After that, our hero went with what worked, dealing with it the exact same way as the first one, by cramming a poison mushroom down its throat. After he decomposed the second slug, forcing himself to endure that disgusting taste all over again, a new predator showed up. This time he was face to face with a centipede, whose legs looked like tiny sharp blades. This new threat completely terrified our golden slime, but he tried to fight back, using the same mushroom trick he'd used on the slugs, but this time it totally failed. The centipede immediately tried to constrict and suffocate our hero, but that didn't work either. He's a slime after all. Piercing attacks don't really affect his gelatinous body. In the end, the centipede pretty much became a free delivery of experience points. After consuming it, he resumed his exploration of the forest, fighting various insects while still munching on mushrooms for sustenance. By this point, he'd grinded his way to level 13 and even unlocked a new achievement, though it wasn't exactly something to brag about. The achievement was titled Weak Creature, but hey, progress is progress, right? He was in a much better spot than when he started. Leaning into that mindset, he made a major decision about his diet. He would stop relying on mushrooms and begin hunting other creatures exclusively. He figured if he kept growing bit by bit, he would eventually snowball into an unstoppable force. And from there, maybe he could even achieve world domination. Though, let's be real, a slime conquering the world is unlikely, unless his name is Rimuru. Anyway, pushing those delusions of grandeur aside, he eventually discovered a small pool of water. His immediate instinct was to dive in and see what new power he could find. But the instant he made contact with the water's surface, his entire body began to violently rupture. To make a long story short, see, fresh water is basically poison to our slime. His cellular structure would bloat up and literally rupture if he ever touched it. So a deep-sea diving adventure was off the table. But it seems the aquatic world decided to pay him a house call. Erupting from the lake's surface, a colossal crab appears. Naturally, our boy immediately starts drooling if a slime can even do that. Yeah, I know, it's a running theme. He even tries to bait the giant crustacean, practically begging for a fight. But the crab is completely unbothered, giving him zero attention. Finally, our slime just gives up, deciding it's a total waste of his energy. He figures he'll just stick to munching on mushrooms. There's no way he's risking a watery grave for some crab legs. But the very instant he turns his back, the crab unleashes a high-pressure water cannon that sends him scrambling for his life. He's forced to dive behind a tree because taking a direct hit from that thing isn't just a bath, it's an instant delete button. The damage would be catastrophic. It was a full-on hydro projectile, and if he dared to peek out from his cover, he'd be immediately sniped. This turned into a tense waiting game. After a few moments, the crab seems to get bored and dips back into the lake. But it was a trick. It had just circled around on land and was now charging him at full speed. This crab was absolutely determined to make him its next meal. Facing this desperate charge, our hero scrambles up a tree because, hey, crabs can't climb trees. Right. Well, the crab was stuck on the ground, but what he found waiting for him in the branches was a gigantic tarantula, or at least some horrifying spider monster. So in the end, he was trapped anyway. Talk about jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire. Our protagonist decides to throw down with the spider. Anything was better than dealing with those water attacks, and besides, he felt confident after beating spiders before. Their slicing attacks are supposed to be useless against his body's immunity. He couldn't have been more wrong. A single swipe from the spider shears off half of his head. Turns out this creature's skill was a whopping level 8, powerful enough to completely bypass his defenses. To make matters 1,000 times worse, the crab below is just relentlessly spamming water shots up into the trees now that he's cornered. Our slime pulls a total desperation move. As the crab fires yet another water blast, our slime dodges at the last second, and the projectile slams directly into the spider. The blast tears off one of the tarantula's legs, and it goes absolutely berserk with fury. It completely forgets about the slime, and redirects all its rage toward the crab, sparking an epic monster-on-monster throwdown. The spider immediately starts blasting the crab with thick webbing. Its claw gets tangled up. The crab gets just as enraged, but when the spider lunges to attack, its fangs can't even scratch the crab's iron-hard shell. Seeing that a direct assault is pointless, the spider decides to use every last strand of its webbing to completely immobilize the crab. But the crab unleashes a final, desperate counterattack, firing water jets wildly in every single direction. In the pure chaos, the spider gets blasted and dies. One of those stray shots nearly vaporizes our slime too. In the end, the slime is the only one left standing, as the crab had literally fought itself to death from sheer exhaustion. After it fired off so many powerful blasts, our slime creeps toward the corpse, trying to figure out his next move. It wasn't like he could just pry open the crab's mouth and shove in a poison mushroom. Its shell was way too tough for that, so he tries a completely different tactic. He attempts to absorb a large stone, trying to use what seems to be a personal inventory system. But because his body is so tiny, his inventory can't store the massive rock. It was already jam-packed with mushrooms. After ejecting every last mushroom from his body, he finally manages to absorb the stone. But now he's incredibly slow, weighed down by the heavy boulder inside him. Even so, he painstakingly drags himself back up the tree with it. Then from high above, he launches himself downwards, aiming to crush the crab like a gooey meteor. The crab tries to fire one last water jet in defense, but a stream of water versus a falling boulder didn't exactly end well for the crab. Our slime was the only one left standing, even snagging a level up and a ton of free food after barely lifting a finger in that whole brawl. A short time later, he tastes his prize, and of course, it was an absolute delicacy. I mean, up to this point, his diet consisted of wood and mushrooms. He was so overcome with emotion, he was about ready to switch the whole genre of the story, from a slime isekai to a gourmet isekai. But putting his culinary dreams aside now that he was full, it was finally time to test out some new powers. He tried every method imaginable to unleash some kind of ability. If a random crab can shoot water cannons, a protagonist slime has to have some cool tricks too, right? Though let's be honest, having a built-in system is already a pretty busted power. But fine, our protagonist pushes himself so hard that his body begins to destabilize, almost evaporating into a gas. He was forcing it way too much. Eventually, he feels a strange lurch deep inside and ends up vomiting a chunk of his own body. And surprisingly, that manifested as a brand new skill, Acid Shot. He was absolutely thrilled. He finally had a real offensive ability, but first he needed to discover its limits. In short, he could fire it as many times as he wanted. The catch was that every single shot cost him a piece of his own body. He was literally weaponizing himself. By the time his test was over, he had shrunk to the size of a marble. Basically, all of his powers are directly tied to his current body mass, which is a massive bummer, because it looks like magic is completely off the table for him. And because of that, if he's ever going to get OP, he's got to forge his body into an unbreakable weapon. Then a galaxy brain idea sparks in his mind. If I have infinite growth, what's stopping me from just consuming myself? With that insane thought, he inches over to the chunk of goo the spider sliced off him and starts chowing down. The second he does, a tidal wave of memories floods his consciousness, if a slime can even have one. That is. But get this, you guys. The piece of our little slime that got lopped off, it started breaking down matter all on its own. Because of that, the main body just sat back and absorbed all the experience points from its own severed limb, and yeah, that is absolutely broken. I mean, he could just fling bits of himself all over the map and circle back later for a power-up snack. It's like having dozens of mouths farming XP for you. But when he tries to put this into practice, it turns out there's a catch. Apparently, whether it's the main body or a clone, if its health dips below 30, the slime kicks into a self-destruct mode, consuming itself. It wasn't a total deal-breaker though, because anytime he eats, he can instantly patch himself back up. So for round 2, he creates a clone with exactly 30 hit points, and that one, it worked like a charm. At that point, my guy is feeling like he's in his Naruto era, spawning a whole squad of shadow clones. Anyway, he sends one clone to munch on wood splinters, another to gobble up mushrooms while he personally tackles what's left of the spider's corpse. And of course, the power surge is intoxicating. After all, basic piercing and slashing attacks literally phase right through him now. Of course, if we're talking a high-level S-tier attack, that's a whole different ballgame. He can't really just shrug that off. Basically, you could say he's damn near immune to physical damage. The real boogeyman would be magical attacks, if magic even exists in this world, since up until now he hasn't seen a single spark. So far, it just seems like the world is full of some freaky animals, and that's about it. But setting that aside, our slime switches up his game plan. This time, he's using himself as the ultimate bait. He stretches his body into a long, tempting line, luring in a whole swarm of crabs. When they're all lined up in a perfect little row, he somehow manages to topple an entire tree right on top of them, crushing the lot of them in one fell swoop. With that, he dings, leveling up from 14 to 15. After a victory feast to get his health back, he starts playing gunslinger with his acid spit. Well, not so much playing. He was grinding for real. He eventually pushes the skill all the way to level 6. From what he can tell, his max output is about 30 bullets at a time, but since he'd only been firing off pieces of his own body, he decides to get experimental. He tries loading up bits of mushrooms, and even tiny pebbles. And of course, he feels like a 500 IQ genius. I mean, who even thinks to do something like that? But his epic science montage is cut short when a bizarre noise echoes from a nearby tree. Naturally, he slides over to investigate. On the way, he spots tiny shimmering lights dancing in the air. At first, he shrugs them off as fireflies, but it's actually an owl, and it is 100% channeling some kind of magic. A wave of pure dread washes over him, because this confirms that magic is terrifyingly real in this world. But the owl wasn't the true threat. It was a puppet. And pulling the strings, a human using a skill called animal symbiosis. Yup, this was the first time a human ever appeared in the story. Apparently, they already knew this forest was sketchy, because no communications of any kind worked once you were inside. That's why they were creeping around using detection skills to scout the area. Meanwhile, our slime is in full-blown panic mode, booking it for his life. When he gets to a lake, he accidentally creates a brand new ability by leaping into the water and jettisoning a part of his body to blast himself forward. He loses a massive chunk of HP, of course, but he rockets to the other side. Hiding behind a tree, he tries to figure out if the coast is clear. To make sure he doesn't die, he decides to snack on some tree bark for a quick heal, but suddenly, he feels an absolutely terrifying presence. His first thought is that the magic owl tracked him down, but as his eyes scan the area, he realizes it's not the owl at all. It was a gargantuan finger, and seeing that thing makes his mind explode with a greedy excitement. According to him, if he could just break down and absorb that finger, which obviously came from some god-tier magical beast, he would instantly patch up all the holes in his power. But the moment he starts the decomposition process, the system screams a warning at him. Decomposition failed. The target's level was astronomically high. As a penalty, his own health bar starts nosediving. But even so, our little slime refuses to back down. He splits his body, zips back to a log to recover his HP, and gets ready to repeat the whole process. Take damage, retreat to heal, and slam back into the corpse again. But apparently Lady Luck was not on his side today. Out of the blue, a violent earthquake rips through the land. A gaping chasm opens right where he's standing, swallowing the giant finger whole. He's just stunned. He can't even trust the ground he's standing on anymore. And the crushing weight of that loss hits him hard. The deeper he pushed into this world, the smaller he felt, so he decided to pump the brakes and just focus on his grind, breaking things down piece by piece. As for that severed finger, it had already tumbled deep into the earth's guts, landing in the lair of some unknown, lurking horror. But back to our slime, who was now putting some serious distance between him and that zone. He needed a new base of operations, and it was time to recall the clones he'd sent out. He scoped out a massive tree and decided to make it home. Then he got to work on the interior design. And for real, this slime is extra. He installs a glowing mushroom for some mood lighting, carves a couch from a solid rock, and slaps together a table using twigs. His new crib was surprisingly bougie. He even built a decoy base to fake out intruders hiding his real sanctuary a little higher up. With his fortress complete, it was time to chill. He started munching on the leftover spider meat, which seemed to be a never-ending buffet, but his peace was about to be shattered. Turns out his new neighbors were loud AF. And who else would it be but those colossal bees from earlier? Completely fed up, he slides over and just deletes one of them. He thought it was going to be a walk in the park, but he instantly knew he'd messed up. He was a single slime against an entire swarm of gigantic bees. Still, the guy had a strat. As the bees poured into his house, he just started swallowing them whole. Their stingers literally couldn't scratch his gooey form. Peeking outside, he finally spotted their hive. The only problem, he had officially drop-kicked the hornet's nest. A terrifying cloud of bees erupted, gunning straight for him. At first, he tried to play it cool, figuring their attacks were useless, and they were technically. But he forgot one critical piece of information. A huge cluster of bodies generates an insane amount of heat, and the thermal energy blasting from this bee swarm was literally starting to cook him. So he wasn't dying from their stingers. He was being boiled alive. In a full-blown panic, he tries to launch himself skyward, but smacks headfirst into a shield made of hardened honey. It was official. These were not normal bees. They were a disciplined army. You had worker drones, armored guard bees, and even a damn mage bee calling the shots. Seeing as diplomacy was off the table, the slime unleashed a torrent of acid shots in every direction, melting dozens of them. Now we all know this move hurts him too, but it wasn't an issue this time because while he was firing, he was siphoning life energy directly from the tree he was latched onto. The real challenge now were the shielded guards who were tanking his acid blasts. As he laid down, suppressing fire, a few bees tried to flank him from behind, which ended horribly for them. Their stingers just harmlessly sunk into his body, doing zero physical damage. Seizing the moment, he slurped up the two attackers. From them, he instantly acquired 4 bee lances, immediately integrated them into his attacks, and finally shattered the shields of the guard bees. Witnessing this new threat, the mage bee commanded a full retreat, completely switching up her strategy. She started casting magic. And not just any magic, she was hurling fireballs in the middle of a forest. A total kamikaze move. Every direct hit dealt devastating damage to our little slime, forcing him to make a run for it the second he saw an opening. He latched onto a new tree to drain its life and heal up. Of course, our boy wasn't just going to play defense. The problem was, the moment he launched a counterattack, the guard bees snapped into a defensive formation, creating a reinforced double-layered shield. Just like that, his acid attacks were completely nullified. But the mage wasn't done making his life a living hell. She ordered the worker bees into what can only be described as suicide mode, sending them dive-bombing and exploding right on top of our slime. He dodged a few but was immediately cornered. With nothing left in the tank, he resigned himself to his fate, getting blown to bits again and again. The mage bee watched a flicker of victory in her eyes. But this was all part of the plan. Because the main time's body was already storming the hive, and their time had run out. To understand this master play, we have to rewind to right before the first bee exploded. Our slime had secretly split off a piece of himself and yeeted it towards the hive. It was just waiting for the perfect moment. The second the mage bee focused all her firepower on the decoy clone, the real slime made a mad dash for their nest. Once inside, he used his pathfinding ability to navigate the labyrinth. He pinpointed the location of the honey storage, and while that was tempting, he was there for a much bigger prize, the queen bee. Moments later, the bee army returned only to find our slime had their queen in a gooey hostage situation. He tried to negotiate, but it became brutally clear this army wasn't interested in a conversation. Left with no choice, the slime executed the queen. The effect was instantaneous. The entire army collapsed, their hive mind severed. Honestly, it was a little disappointing. Our slime was actually down to negotiate. But in the end, it seemed the creatures of this world were driven by pure instinct. After decomposing the entire hive, our slime leveled up to 21. Not only did this process massively upgrade his poison resistance, but he also unlocked a completely unexpected new skill called Central Command. It obviously came from the queen, but for now, he had no idea what it actually did, since he had nothing left to command. Shaking that off, he tried to dump points into his decomposition skill and max it out, but the system straight up blocked him. No can do. So the only stat he could actually buff was his weaker pulse. On another note, his inventory was now overflowing with honey, which meant he was basically sitting on a mountain of healing potions. Anyway, staring out at the carnage he'd unleashed, he wasn't sure how to process it all. Until this moment, his entire existence had been a bloody, brutal fight for survival. The thought left him feeling deeply conflicted. So much so that his mind spun up this tragic little story. In it, a father crab marches off to work and just never returns. His family frantically searches for him, but what they discover is no longer the crab they knew. Long story short, our slime was now grappling with feeling like the villain after the trail of destruction he'd left. Snapping back to reality, he chalked it up to the lingering influence of his human mind, stuck inside a monster's shell, and he resolved to crush that feeling. Besides, in this world, if you're not the hunter, you're the prey. It's the simple law of nature: the strong devour the weak. And with that cold logic clicking into place, he remembered his main quest to track down and reclaim the other fragments of his body scattered across this world. During his search, he stumbled upon the glow of a campfire, and wouldn't you know it, it was the same crew of humans who were puppeteering that creepy owl from before. The party was a trio: a pink-haired girl named Mia Ross, a C-rank adventurer, a grizzled B-rank adventurer named Rake Carter, and another B-rank warrior named Cole Fern. The reason they were out here, apparently their guildmaster had completely vanished 2 whole years ago. They'd set out to find him, but they ended up hopelessly lost when all their communications died in the deep forest. The entire woods had twisted into a deadly labyrinth. At this point, they were seriously considering cutting their losses and heading back. I mean, their guildmaster was a total beast, and they figured he could probably survive on his own until reinforcements from the church arrived. The huge catch was that he'd already been MIA for 2 years, and dark rumors were swirling back in town, suggesting their guild had gotten on the church's bad side. To make things sketchier, the guildmaster had vanished right after taking a mission that was personally handed down by the Pope himself. The master of this guild, called No Styles, was a guy named Gone, and for those wondering, the guild's name was built on its core principle: no deception, no abuse, no malice. Because the No Styles Guild welcomed anyone, regardless of their profession level or even their race. They became legendary for their spirit and generosity, rocketing up the ranks to become one of the 8 great guilds. But that kind of rapid success started making some powerful people within the church real nervous. That's why the guildmaster announced he was taking a solo mission to the swamp forest. But shortly after he left, the line went dead. No one heard from him ever again. And of course, with a guild being leaderless for 2 years, it began to crumble, with members leaving in droves, as its former glory faded into a memory. Faced with this grim reality, Carter had assembled this team to try and find their master and restore the No Styles Guild to its former greatness. Right then, Naya started talking about how, if it wasn't for their guildmaster, she probably never would have made it as an adventurer, but Fern immediately cut her off. He shot back that she had a beast tamer class and could easily land a spot in any other guild, a comment that obviously stung her. Meanwhile, our slime was trying to eavesdrop on their conversation because any intel on the human world was absolutely vital. He inched a little closer to hear better. Bad move. Fern instantly detected a monster's presence and unleashed a storm of ice spikes. Of course, it wasn't the slime's main body, but the piece was still connected to him. To make things worse, Nia's summoned horned boar instantly devoured the chunk of slime right in front of it, sending a jolt of pain through our protagonist and dragging him toward them. For a second, it looked like it was game over for our slime, but then Nia reined in her horned boar. She insisted they couldn't just go around attacking every small, defenseless monster they saw. And when Nia got a good look at the slime, she actually thought he was adorable, and even wanted to form a contract with him, an offer our slime desperately wanted to take. The deal didn't get far though, because Carter marched over and told Nia to stop picking up random trash, reminding her they needed to rest before moving out the next day. Our slime was naturally offended. To prove he was more than just some mob, he contorted his body to form a complex written character, basically trying to scream, "I am an intelligent life form." The group was definitely stunned, but they had absolutely no clue what he was trying to spell out. In the end, our slime just gave up and bounced, figuring it'd be too suspicious to keep pushing it. Retreating to his hiding spot, the slime had one thought: he never wanted to face that terrifying owl ever again. And with that chilling thought pushed aside, he activated his command core ability, the powerful skill he'd snatched after defeating the queen bee. He activated it using it like a homing beacon to track down the missing pieces of his own body. And boom, he gets a hit on the first fragment of his body. It was colossal, forcing him to absorb it in tiny increments because his power level was laughably low. After that first score though, the trail went cold. The signal from the second piece faded to a barely there whisper. Then he found out why. A slug was literally eating his other self. He instantly obliterated the creature, overcome with a tidal wave of emotion, vowing that he would finally rescue his son. But this story was careening towards a tragic finale, because out of the clear blue sky, a frog leaped into the frame and swallowed the slime's son whole. Consumed by pure rage, he declared that the frog would pay for its crime in blood, for stealing his son away. He blasted an acid-laced stone at it, but the attack did next to nothing, because the frog casually slapped the projectile away with its tongue. Realizing he was hopelessly outmatched, he plunged into the lake. Even then, the slime refused to back down. He scrambled up a tree and launched an attack from above, but the frog simply submerged itself in the water to hide. It couldn't stay hidden forever, though. Frogs are amphibians. It was bound to come up for air eventually. Seizing that fleeting moment of vulnerability, the slime unleashed a precision strike that slammed directly into the frog's left eye. Riding the wave of this small victory, the slime scaled back to the treetop and resumed his barrage. Only this time, he had no more stones, because his inventory was completely tapped out. This new tactic didn't fare any better, as the frog simply gulped down his acidic projectiles. It was a shocking turn of events. Caught completely off guard, the slime took a devastating blow from the frog's tongue. And it didn't end there. The frog began to reel him in, swallowing him alive. But even then, he would not surrender. He clung desperately to the tree with all of his might, snapped off a branch and brandished it like a spear, ramming it deep into the frog's mouth, and finally killing the beast. The biggest letdown was that the corpse flopped into the lake, which meant the slime couldn't decompose it for any loot. But his troubles were far from over. Once again, as if from nowhere, another predator emerged from the shadows. It was another frog, but this one was different, a sanctified frog. I didn't even know frogs could achieve sainthood. This holy amphibian then started firing, a crimson liquid from its eyes. Our slime went full Spider-Man, slinging himself from tree to tree in a frantic escape. The insane part was that the frog did the exact same thing, using its tongue as a grappling hook. At this point, I had no clue what this blood power was all about, but our slime got tagged by it and took a massive chunk of damage. He didn't have a split second to register what just happened before he was slammed by another attack. Making matters infinitely worse, he was sent hurtling toward the water. Capitalizing on this critical weakness, the frog lunged to devour our slime. Now, he was taking a double hit of damage from the water and from the corrosive fluid inside the frog's mouth. Trapped, the slime tried to split his body apart to escape, but the frog just sucked him right back in. Since escape was off the table, the slime switched to plan B, detonate everything from the inside out. To do this, he unleashed the honey he'd looted from that beehive. It made him grow exponentially, until he literally burst the frog apart. The only problem was, he was now absurdly huge. He had essentially glitched his own stats, blowing past his maximum HP. His colossal size meant he had more than enough cellular fluid to manage any osmotic pressure changes. Oh, and of course this super mode was on a very short timer. He was honestly a little bummed since he was fantasizing about becoming a Megazord, stomping through cities and leveling everything in sight. But with no time to waste, he sprang into action. He blitzed around the entire lake, attempting to dissolve every single fish he could find. They were way too fast though, so he abandoned the water for dry land. And that, my friends, is when he began to consume absolutely everything in his path. Well, not quite everything. He spared a family of weasels, claiming he couldn't bring himself to kill something cute like it was the last anchor to his fading humanity. On this rampage, he stumbled upon a squirrel that could shoot fire, and that one received absolutely no mercy. Meanwhile, in a different part of the forest, an absolutely wild fight was going down. A crocodile was locked in a brutal struggle with a walking tree, which was actually being puppeted by one of the slime's other bodies. The skirmish was over almost as soon as it began. Every time the slime lost his tree mech, he just hijacked another one. With his newest wooden body, he managed to ensnare the crocodile and burst its eyes with a strange cloud of pollen. Now blind, the massive lizard resorted to thermal vision for one last desperate attack. It slammed its powerful tail into the slime's core, crushing him instantly. And right after that fight concluded, the crocodile's mangled eyes began to transform, and it started morphing into the same kind of sanctified monster as the frog. But we never got to see the full transformation because the slime's gigantic main body suddenly crashed the party, and it dissolved the mutating crocodile without even a sideways glance. He had to be fast after all, because his main body didn't have much time left in that Titan form, so he was making every second count. As he continued to carve a path of destruction through the woods, something weird began to unfold. It felt as though the forest itself was alive. Everywhere the slime destroyed, the trees and plants would instantly regrow right behind him. And get this, the second our slime tries to scope it out, this insane explosion of energy just erupts out of nowhere. The power-up instantly wears off, and his massive form just deflates, shrinking him right back down to his tiny, squishy self. He pulls up his status screen, and bam, level 49. But his new title, it went from Weak Creature to Lord of Weak Creatures. So basically he's still trash tier, just a slightly stronger version of trash. Anyway, my guy checks his inventory, and discovers it's crammed with absolute junk. We're talking so much garbage that he's literally starting to feel sick since his inventory is basically his stomach. So he just yeets everything out and instantly feels way lighter. And right on cue, a notification pops up, revealing that once he hits level 60, he gets to choose between a full-on class change or a natural evolution. My dude immediately starts zoning out, lost in a daydream, picturing himself becoming a mage slime, this sick hybrid of a class change and an evolution. From there, it's just a short hop to total world domination. For real though, what is it with slimes and their obsession with taking over the world? Is that just like a slime thing? But a buzzing sound snaps him out of his power trip, and yep, those are mage bees, all flying with a purpose. Our curious little blob decides to trail them, and before long stumbles upon a massive colony of beehives, or more like a sprawling city of interconnected hives. But just as he's taking it all in, a pure white flamingo swoops in and starts chowing down on all the bee eggs. And yeah, this ain't the same one from before. This one's white, while the other was a fiery red. Back to the action. The bees are obviously not just going to stand by and watch this thing eat their babies. They launch an all-out assault, completely swarming the flamingo until it's just a giant buzzing shell of bees. But it's completely useless, since raw numbers mean nothing to this beast. The mage bees sync up and unleash a massive volley of fire magic at the bird. And again, it tanks the hit without a scratch. Actually, it does more than tank it. It straight up inhales all that fire magic, and its feathers glow a menacing red. Then its freaky snake-like tail uses thermal vision, pinpoints the queen hidden deep inside the hive, and snipes her, causing the entire bee army to fall into chaos. This proves the flamingo is packing some serious brainpower, but this fight is far from over. Suddenly, a patch on the flamingo's wing starts icing over, and wouldn't you know it, it's our trio of adventurers from before. The battle ignites once more as the flamingo shatters the ice and lunges forward to attack. Carter barely manages to block the strike, but his dinky little shield gets absolutely obliterated in the process. Without missing a beat, the flamingo attacks again, this time whipping its serpent tail right at him. Just as it's about to connect, Nia charges in on her horned boar, saving Carter's skin by a hair's breadth. The flamingo, now seriously ticked off, unleashes a high-level fire spell, and this thing is on another level, because it's all the magic it absorbed from the bees concentrated into one devastating blast. To counter this insane attack, Fern has to burn through nearly his entire mana pool to summon a massive ice barrier. The only problem? Our little slime buddy is standing way too close, and almost gets nuked as collateral damage. In the end, Fern's barrier holds, and the slime is just vibing on the sidelines, totally jealous, wishing he could learn magic too, though honestly I'm not sure that's the best idea. Right after Fern gasps that he's tapped out of high-level magic for a while, after dropping that massive defensive spell. That proved the magic was OP, but it came with a serious cost. With both guys basically on the bench, it's up to Nia to somehow keep this fight going. While the flamingo is distracted by the horned boar, Carter goes 100% rocketing into the air and then plummeting down at an insane speed, bringing an iron mace crashing down right on the flamingo's skull. Because of that move, it looks like the fight is finally over, and the team starts to let their guard down, a fatal mistake. The snake tail whips around and strikes Carter clean in the back, pumping him full of venom. Fern reacts instantly, knocking the tail away as Carter fumbles for an antidote potion. But this isn't just any poison, it's petrifying venom. Because of that, the stone is already creeping up Carter's neck, blocking the antidote from ever going down. And just like that, Carter is turned into a complete statue. Faced with this nightmare, Fern and Nia have no choice but to bail, leaving Carter's petrified body and the monster behind. As they're desperately escaping and chugging potions, Fern admits they totally underestimated the monster's power. They now realize it has to be at least a Lord-level threat. And speaking of the devil, the flamingo suddenly materializes right in their path. Nia freaks out, screaming about what they're going to do now. Fern desperately fires off some ice magic, but it does absolutely nothing except tick the monster off even more. Because of that, it starts charging up that same ridiculously powerful fire spell again. With zero options left, Fern screams at Nia to run and get help from the church while he buys her some time. He then unleashes that same massive ice barrier spell, trapping himself inside with the monster in a final desperate move. As Nia is frantically running for her life, she spots that same owl from before, which gives her a flicker of hope. It means she can find her way back way faster. The only problem is that the owl was no longer taking her orders. It was now glowing, corrupted by that strange, unholy power. Meanwhile, deep inside a sealed chamber, we find Gon the Guildmaster, who went missing. And let's be real, he was not going to make it much longer. He had waged such a desperate war that the system itself was now coming to collect its dues, since he'd milked it for every drop of power he could. Then another titanic monster materialized, and this was no low-level mob. This was the king of the swamp forest, Kido Illawa. He looked down on Gon, asking if that system was the secret sauce that let his guild skyrocket so fast. He asked because Gon had been a prisoner there for 2 years, a lab rat, while the monsters ran experiments on the system to discover its true potential. And since Gon had been so helpful, the Forest King offered him a chance to join their epic plan for dimensional ascension. Naturally, Gon refused. Because of that, the Forest King moved in for the kill. It was a close call, but Gon ripped something from his inventory at the last second. It was holy water. He could have used this from the very beginning, but he held back, saving it for the real mastermind behind this whole nightmare. However, with his powers completely drained, he had no other choice. And honestly, I don't know if that makes him a tactical genius or just a straight-up fool. Another reason he saved the holy water was because the Forest King possessed an immortal body. Since holy water is designed to obliterate the soul, it was, in theory, the ultimate weapon against him. But even so, the Forest King didn't die and immediately started regenerating. Once his body was whole again, he activated that same sanctified mode, and Gon revealed its terrifying name, the power of adaptation. This insane ability actually stemmed from the finger of the Dragon Emperor, the very same one our slime had stumbled upon earlier. Thanks to that cursed finger, the Forest King unlocked a skill called Inviolable, which granted him this broken adaptive power. And the craziest part, the one who originally severed that finger, was none other than Gon himself. Back in the day, he had coated his sword in holy water, the only way he could manage to slice through the dragon. But now, with his entire supply of holy water gone, and the king already having adapted to it, it was really looking like game over for Gon. In a flash, countless gnarled hands erupted from the earth and seized him. Gon barely managed to claw his way out of that pit, but the Forest King had already prepared another attack, and this one was on a completely different level of devastation. Gon tried to face it head-on, but he was already suffering from the fatigue debuff. It was painfully obvious he was going to lose. To make everything worse, his weapon shattered into pieces. With Gon collapsed on the ground, a bleeding and broken mess, the Forest King began to celebrate. His triumph convinced Gon was regretting not going all out from the start. But putting an end to the drama, the king raised his hand to deliver the final blow, channeling the raw power of the Imperial Dragon's finger he had absorbed. Yet Gon refused to surrender and activated a scroll covered in bizarre symbols. The Forest King's triumphant face instantly twisted into pure terror. He recognized it, a demon summoning scroll. This thing was apparently so dangerous that the king started pleading for his life and even cried out for the Pope to save him. But the summoned demon crushed the Forest King, like he was nothing more than an ant. Afterward, the demon drifted toward Gon, remarking that it had been a very long time since they had last crossed paths, the last time being when they tried to kill each other. The demon was so overjoyed to see him again that it even offered to lend Gon its power so he could annihilate these wicked monsters. Naturally, Gon refused the offer, knowing damn well it was some kind of twisted trap. With the job finished, he dismissed the demon. In that brief moment of calm, he checked his system window and saw his HP steadily draining away. His mana was already completely gone. And here's where the plot goes completely insane. Gon was the one who summoned our protagonist. In fact, he attempted to connect his system to the slimes, but of course he had no idea he'd summoned a slime. The system simply replied that a connection was impossible because their systems were not linked. Meanwhile, our slime was trying to devour the rest of Carter's body, which had been turned completely to stone. But since it was literally a rock, he couldn't even take a bite, unwilling to leave with nothing. He simply snatched Carter's weapon and took off. Following the trail left by the other two, the slime arrived at a gigantic wall of ice. Being a smart slime, he sent a tiny piece of himself to peek over and see what was happening. And yup, Fern was already dead, and the flamingo was beyond furious and looked absolutely starving. Seeing that the slime bailed immediately, he had no interest in becoming the next meal on the menu. With only one target left in the flamingo's territory, he zipped over to Naya to check if she was still breathing. And technically she was, but who knew for how much longer? Her own owl suddenly turned on her, viciously attacking with a skill that morphed its beak into a deadly scythe. It stretched its neck out unnaturally and began spinning like a demented top, slashing wildly in all directions. It truly looked like the end for Nia. She had completely lost control of her owl, and even her horned boar was pinned helplessly between the thick tree trunks. Just as the owl swooped in for the final lethal strike, Nia, fueled by pure desperation, activated her mind control skill, which plunged her consciousness directly into the owl's mental world. Inside, everything appeared strangely normal, at least until she laid eyes on a breathtakingly beautiful angel model. Beckoning her forward, the angel revealed a terrifying secret. Its other half was a straight-up demon. That nightmarish vision shattered, yanking her and the owl back to the real world, only for her to snap back just in time to get blasted square in the face. And the one who unleashed the attack, our boy the slime, wielding the very mace he'd jacked from Carter. He could pull this off because his pulse ability was totally maxed out, and he'd already hit level 49. He was whipping the mace around like a meteor hammer, one of those spiky balls on a chain. Not gonna lie, it was a pretty wild sight. With that crazy weapon, the slime managed to save Nia's horned boar from getting clapped. And speaking of Nia, in the absolute chaos of the moment, she saw Carter's weapon, and her brain glitched, actually mistaking the slime for the man himself. But this beatdown wasn't over. The owl swooped back in, absolutely furious, forcing a quick response. The slime went liquid, spreading himself thin across the battlefield, and splitting into multiple decoys to throw it off. The owl lunged for the wrong one, and got a brutal counter right in the family jewels. Seizing that perfect eye-watering moment, the horned boar charged in launching the stunned owl into the air. Our slime then finished the job with a devastating spinning mace strike, amplifying the weapon's piercing power. Once the dust settled, Nia's panic finally subsided, and she recognized who her real savior was. She had to ask if he'd followed her, figuring if he had, it might be a sign they had some kind of major fated connection. On that feeling alone, she offered him a master-servant contract, but the instant the ritual began, a massive red flag popped up from the slime system. Accept this deal, and the system would be permanently deleted. And get this, the slime actually thought about it. In fact, his mind started wandering again, lost in a total daydream. He pictured a life where he was no longer alone, a world where they would constantly be rivals, pushing each other to get stronger. He imagined fusing with her to become a living suit of armor, or maybe evolving into some legendary creature. Together, they'd defeat the Demon King, get married, and live happily ever after. Yeah, his imagination was working overtime. But just as he was about to accept this fantasy life, reality crashed down in the most tragic way possible. Naya's head was suddenly ripped from her shoulders. The culprit was the owl, or rather the pilot, inside. Enraged, the horned boar charged the mechanical bird, but its attack was completely useless. A de-evolution spell washed over it, and for some bizarre reason, the massive beast shriveled into a creature resembling a tiny lizard or a tadpole. Then, from within the owl's chassis, a human head emerged. It was the blue-hatted guildmaster Merlin, who was also one of the church's 7 holy knights. He'd managed to find this hidden sanctuary, because the Forest King's death had shattered the prison containing Gon. Merlin's whole mission was to eliminate Gon before he could reclaim his full power. Piloting the owl, Merlin flew off, leaving the slime frozen in pure shock and trauma. His mind reeled. Did that mean the flamingo from earlier was also being controlled? He glanced to the side, and saw the body of the girl, who was almost his master. Even though the contract was never sealed, a fire of pure rage ignited within the slime as he swore vengeance. He knew he wasn't strong enough yet, but that didn't matter. Meanwhile, back with Gon, the system sent a chilling notification about the mana loan he'd taken. The cost had already been deducted straight from his maximum lifespan. Despite this, he frantically kept trying to locate the other transmigrator, who shared his system, but he was getting nothing. This was a huge problem because he was running out of time. And speaking of the other user, our slime suddenly materialized on a branch right behind Gon. Seeing this stranger, the slime instantly assumed he was one of the goons who killed Nia. So he launched a merciless surprise attack, swinging Carter's mace right at Gon's skull. Already severely wounded, poor Gon didn't stand a chance and crumpled to the ground. It was only after landing the blow that the slime got a better look and realized he might have just attacked the wrong person. I mean, it was dark out. But that didn't stop Gon from staggering to his feet, absolutely livid. The slime was still holding Carter's mace, and worse, he was covered in the lingering mana of both Fern and Nia, making him look guilty as hell. Luckily, at that very second, the slime system finally synced with Gon's, preventing a fatal misunderstanding. With the connection made, Gon started to lay everything out. To battle the church, he'd activated his noble phantasm, and yeah, it's pretty much exactly like the concept from the Fate anime. He'd used a skill called Coordinated Hope, and that's what summoned the slime to this world. Our slime understood the summoning part, but he couldn't see how he was supposed to help when he'd just failed to protect Nia. Gon then explained that in the beginning, he had been just as lost as the slime, completely clueless about what was going on. But by grinding out the system's quests, he slowly built up his power. The issue was obvious, though. The main character was a literal slime, not a human like Gon. How was a blob of goo supposed to get strong? And that's when the plot twist dropped. Gon revealed he wasn't human either. He was a member of a race that utterly despised humans, the goblins. Hearing this, the slime's wild imagination immediately kicked into high gear once more. Everyone figured Gon rocked that full-body armor because he was secretly hideous. The reality, the exact opposite. Dude was so ridiculously good-looking it was literally a curse, a fact that made the slime low-key salty, since their life stats were on completely different planets. And get this, not a single soul in the guild had a clue that Gon was a goblin the whole time. Regardless, they had to bounce as soon as possible before the church's forces closed in. And when Gon said bounce, he meant kicking off a system sync that would basically let the slime download all of his game-breaking abilities. And while this insane power transfer was going down, Gon finally spilled the tea on why he took that suicide mission into the forest to begin with. Turns out, he was trying to unravel this world's dark secrets, but he walked straight into an ambush and was forced to play every last ace up his sleeve just to survive the church's assault. And you better believe the church went all in too, throwing everything they had at him in a desperate counterattack. Little Slime was just spinning, completely lost as the situation spiraled out of control. So what's the church's deal in all this? The Pope Gon breaks it down fast. The church in this world is running a death cult that wants to wipe out every living thing to rip open a portal to some higher dimension. Naturally, Little Slime is like, how the heck are they going to pull that off? But instead of answering, Gon suddenly pivots to his whole life story. He was born in a desolate mine, the absolute bottom of the goblin food chain, in a constant state of starvation. But on his 5th birthday, he snapped and wiped the floor with every single goblin in that mine. That's the moment his system booted up, and his soul remembered everything. He was a transmigrator, a human in his past life. Because of that, he immediately tried to rescue the human women, being held captive as breeding stock, hoping to get them to safety. The only problem, they had been through so much trauma that they were all completely hooked on that lifestyle. But luckily for him, Gon says he has a racial skill called dual cultivation. Hearing that name, Little Slime immediately asks if the ability's effect is as literal as its own power, which is just straight up decomposition. Gon confirms it. He says the ability is draining, but every time he used it with other adventurers, it would boost both his level and his profession by 1. So by grinding that racial ability again and again, he eventually forged a rock-solid foundation for the power he has today. Little Slime, of course, is getting super annoyed, because this sounds less like a tragic backstory and more like a massive flex. The thing is, this little heart-to-heart is violently interrupted when Merlin warps in, unleashing a wave of magic that slices through literally everything. A second later, he's actually bummed out for one-shotting Gon so easily, but obviously Gon wasn't going down that fast. Still, if this keeps up, he's definitely toast. The system is screaming at him, warning that he's completely running on fumes. So Gon just tells the system to shut it. Seeing this, Merlin's eyes light up and he asks if he could somehow possess Gon's body and steal that busted system for himself. While the two of them are monologuing, Little Slime launches a desperate spray of acid, laced with pebbles, which, let's be real, was never going to work. I mean, if the goal was to piss Merlin off, it was a total success. But that single moment of distraction was all Gon needed to lunge. Too bad Merlin was one step ahead, and instantly encases Gon in a searing cube of fire. But that's not enough to stop him. He shatters the fire prison and grabs Merlin by the skull, roaring that if he's going down, he's dragging one of these church freaks straight to hell with him. The system confirms he's down to his last HP with his skill Last Stand officially triggered. It lasts for 1 minute, and during that window, no matter what damage he takes, his health is locked at 1. Merlin starts panicking, screaming at Gon to let him go, demanding to know if he understands the cost of using such a forbidden spell. The system then flashes the skill's horrific trade-off. The user's HP will be reset to 0, meaning the moment the skill ends, the host dies. But Gon just smirks. It doesn't matter to him, and with that, he triggers Final Pact. A wave of regret hits Gon. They literally just met, and now he has to say goodbye. But there's no other choice, as this is his final play. If they don't erase Merlin right here, right now, none of them are walking away. He then hands off the mission to save the world to Little Slime, his last words, a warning to never ever trust the church. The slime, now sobbing, pleads with him to stop. He cries that he was still waiting for Gon to carry him on his adventures, and if a warrior as mighty as Gon couldn't beat Merlin, how could a useless blob of goo possibly win? But Gon just tells him to have faith in himself. Maybe he says his entire purpose for being summoned was just to be the vessel that brought the slime to this world. Then an overwhelming light explodes everywhere, and just as quickly it vanishes, leaving almost nothing behind. Merlin reappears from the blast, absolutely raging about what Gon just did. He screams that the entire mission is a complete disaster. 5 of the sacred candles of life that were supposed to connect them to the chaotic universe and pave the way for their ascension had just been snuffed out in a single instant. Everything would have gone according to plan if it weren't for the slime. But the slime ain't having it, lunging at Merlin and calling him out for spouting straight-up garbage. He roars that he's carrying on Gon's legacy, fueled by the raw hatred he feels for that girl from before, and he's here to finish the fight. He then drops a bombshell, revealing he had a clone stashed away as a backup plan, allowing him to just download his consciousness into it. Meanwhile, Merlin is frantically trying to scrape this gunk off his face, muttering about what kind of freak Gon left behind. He rockets towards the slime, screaming that he's about to catch all the smoke meant for that bastard Gon. He unleashes his ultimate move, Abyss Magic Atavistic Lightning, but it just fizzles out against the slime. Even the slime is shook. Merlin is just as baffled, completely unable to process why his epic spell did absolutely 0. He starts spiraling. Did his soul take too much damage? Is his magic power nerfed? Screw it. He launches himself forward again, refusing to believe that the kingdom's top-tier mage could ever get clapped by some low-level slime. The slime realizes Merlin almost got zeroed by Gon, so he's totally in the dark about his secret ability. He plans to exploit that knowledge gap and catch him off guard, but out of nowhere, another monster jumps into the fray, blindsiding Merlin with a massive hit, slamming him straight into a boulder. Merlin is absolutely livid. He's completely powerless and he knows it. He bellows that when he comes back, he's gonna burn this entire disgusting swamp to the ground. But then, the new monster unleashes a fire spell that scores a direct hit. The slime is stunned, frozen in place as he simply watches, as the creature straight up devours Merlin whole. A moment later, an intense light erupts from the monster, and the slime wonders if it's an evolution. The beast has bulked up, growing even bigger with new white streaks patterning its body, giving it a seriously upgraded look. But instead of turning on the slime, the creature just takes off, soaring into the distance. A few moments later, the system screen pops up. Skill transfer was at 37%, and the connection was severed, failing the acquisition of super magic. 4-dimensional enhancement, elemental resistance, martial arts, talent advanced, mystic arts, and super Hihuan. However, the system confirmed he successfully snagged forging, large map, and encyclopedia, along with cooking skill and medical knowledge. The slime sighs, thinking maybe life was better when he was just a small, idle slime. He'd leveled up like crazy, but he just wasn't feeling it. Still shaking off the funk, he scoops up the armor lying on the ground and tells himself he can't afford to mope. He has to recover and carry on Gon's mission. Otherwise, when the Vatican finally makes its move to sacrifice everyone in this world, no one will be safe. He figures that, even without a body, he might be able to pilot the armor. He gives it a shot, but it's a total fail. He focuses on moving the right side, but the left side won't budge. He can't get the legs to work either, and the whole thing just topples over. Giving up, he ditches the armor, deciding to just stash it for later. It would be much smarter to hide, since there was no telling if the Vatican would send more goons. He absorbs the entire suit into his body and makes a beeline for his tree. He thinks to himself that so much went down in just one night. It was a lot to take in. He decides to sort through all the new intel he'd just acquired. The system boots up the data, and once it hits 100%, several locations on the world map materialize. Valfenda Mountain, the polar ice mantles, the wasteland mine, the royal capital, and the swamp forest. The slime was floored. This world was huge. He was currently hanging out in the swamp forest. The system then dropped some more lore, explaining that the royal capital had set up a network of teleportation gates in various locations for fast travel. These portals are run by the church, and adventurers have to request access through them to go on their quests. The catch, however, is that half of all resources the adventurers find must be forked over to the papacy as a customs tax. He starts thinking that if he could just enter a portal, he could warp straight to the capital. A path forward was finally clear, but before he could leave, he needed a serious power-up. Right now, his only real assets were a busted set of high-tier gear and that girl's body. He debated just ditching it, since no matter how well he preserved it, maybe it was better to just let nature take its course. But then her face flashed in his mind. He steels his resolve, declaring that, from now on, even if he's the last one standing, he will personally tear down the corrupt church. Right on cue, the system dings, level up. He went from 49 to 50, earning 0.8 skill enhancement points and acquiring the skill, Domination. He immediately fuses Domination Technique and Central Command, creating a brand new skill, Parasitic Domination. As dawn breaks, the scene cuts to an unsuspecting frog. Its danger sense goes wild, allowing it to barely dodge the slime's attack that nearly splattered it. But that split-second dodge wasn't enough, because the slime was already striking from every direction at once. And just like that, the frog's life flickered out. The slime offered a cold apology, admitting he needed its corpse as a test subject for a new ability. A system window materialized, detailing the skill, Parasitism, a complete hostile takeover of a target's body. It worked by injecting his own bioneural will, overwriting and erasing the original consciousness. But that wasn't all. The next stage, Domination would twist the target into a walking, soulless puppet. The slime noted that since gaining access to the system's vast encyclopedia, all the data in his own system had become way more detailed, making his powers so much easier to get. A moment later, he spat a glob of himself into the dead frog's mouth, unleashing his parasite ability. Deep inside the corpse, something took hold, and the frog's limbs began to twitch. The system pinged, skill successful. But he'd already hit his cap for wandering corpses. To command more, he'd have to level up the skill. The slime thought to himself that, once the parasite seizes a body, it moves on its own, a zombie on autopilot. Now for the fun part, Domination. He focused his mind, projecting his consciousness into the reanimated corpse, and suddenly, he was staring out through the frog's eyes. It was unreal. His very essence had been uploaded into the dead creature, a fact the system immediately confirmed. The body's durability clocked in at 89%, and its skills were listed as Charged Strike and Tongue Strike. He mulled over the durability stat. A corpse doesn't have HP after all, just a decaying shell. Looking around, he took in the swamp through the frog's panoramic vision. So this is what the world looked like to a swamp frog. Gazing at his new webbed hands, he realized the muscles, the nerves, even the muscle memory of the original owner had been perfectly preserved, making it feel like his own skin without any awkward adjustments. The frog puppet turned to look at his original slime body, and a chilling thought crossed his mind when his consciousness returns. Does the puppet just switch to some auto mode? That sounded insanely risky. For a real fight, he'd need to get the hang of stealth, but he immediately junked that idea. For now, it was time to test drive this new toy. A surge of excitement shot through him. The frog spotted an insect buzzing nearby, and its tongue lashed out with lightning speed, snagging it midair. Interesting, he thought, and decided to go again. He bounded off hunting for more bugs or small critters, until he zeroed in on a snail and began to approach. Then, without warning, the connection severed. He was ripped from the body. Looking at the now limp frog, he understood. The max range was 30 meters. He couldn't stray too far from his host body. But then, to the slime's shock, the frog lurched back to its feet and started hopping around erratically. He realized what was happening. The body had entered automatic domination mode. His main body was basically a control tower beaming out signals. If he moved the puppet too far away, his weak signal would just drop. But when the parasite puppet got back within range of the main body, it defaulted to an autopilot running on the pure base instincts of its former life. But as he watched the frog repeatedly fail to snatch the snail, he realized this auto mode was, to put it mildly, not very bright. Deciding the test was over, he used his storage skill on the frog. A new plan began to form. If he could take down that bird from before, he could parasitize its corpse too. Imagine if he could puppet high-level monsters. His whole game would change. He could raise a terrifying parasite army to crush the corrupt papacy. With a new goal, he set off to find a more worthy target. While creeping through the swamp, he was ambushed out of nowhere. A chunk of his HP vanished. Who the hell had the nerve to jump him? As his body regenerated, he smirked. Perfect timing. This just saved him the trouble of having to hunt them down. The attacker revealed itself a pufferfish, with a seriously sketchy-looking mouth. A wave of fury washed over him. Did every single creature, human or monster, really think he was some kind of pushover? Fine. He'd show them the true terrifying power of a level 50 low-tier monster lord. Meanwhile, the pufferfish was already sucking in water, prepping another attack. The slime effortlessly weaved through the blasts and fired back with a fist-sized rock. The impact was devastating. "You really think you can just attack me and swim away?" he snarled. In a flash, he morphed his body into a massive net and swept through the water, trapping dozens of fish. The system notifications began to flood in. He was raking in experience points from the catch. Once he secured the pufferfish's corpse, its stats popped up. 99% durability with water gun, steel tooth cut and inflate. Wasting no time, he immediately lunged at a nearby crab. The creature thrashed wildly, but the slime sneered, telling it shaking him off wouldn't be so easy. He flowed into its shell, and in an instant, the monster was parasitized and dominated. Another puppet for his growing collection. Durability, 99%. Skills, water gun, foam and claws. The camera pans out, showing a swarm of bees in a fierce battle as the newly empowered slime marches forward. He unleashes the frog in a devastating counter, its tongue whipping out like a blur to snatch all the bees in a single motion. It even coiled around to snag more of them. XP starts flooding in for the slime, but right as he starts to absorb them, he clocks the bees, charging up a massive fireball aimed right at his face. No time to think, he instantly body swaps into the crab. The crab and the bees blast each other simultaneously from opposite sides, but a system alert flashes the crab's body. Water is completely tapped out, which means its water gun is useless. The second the crab goes down, the bees unleash hell, triggering a massive explosion in the swamp, right where the frog and crab were standing. The bees think it's a wrap, but then out of nowhere, one of them gets blasted by a sneak attack and dies on the spot. The slime is stoked. The surprise attack with the pufferfish was a total success. The bees, now furious, try to rush him again, but he body jumps one more time, launching himself straight into their hive. The bees throw up a triple-thick wax barrier to protect themselves, but my guy just shatters right through it. He was just thinking this was a good little teamwork test, and then he whips out a freaking plasma cannon. He starts carving his way through the hive from the outside in, until he finds his target, the queen bee, and immediately infects her with his parasite. While taking her over, he's already thinking that if this all goes smoothly, he's about to have his very first army. As he gains control of the queen, he realizes she commands the other bees through a hive mind. She's got 99% durability, and her main ability is that hive mind link. He tries to use the skill, ordering the bees to rise up, but gets confused when absolutely nothing happens. Then the awful truth dawns on him: if the queen dies, the entire colony dies with her. Because of that fatal flaw, he figures using a parasite queen to command the hive just isn't a viable strategy. So he decides to swap her out for a more useful bee, selecting a level 1 mage bee, whose skills are magic gathering and levitation. A little while later, back at the home tree, the slime assembles his entire undead squad. He officially names the frog Froggy. The crab he calls Konosuke, since it's another crab, but with way bigger claws. The pufferfish gets a simple name, Piggy. Then he wonders where the master bee went, since he literally just parasitized it. But when he glances over at Froggy, he sees it. The bee is hanging out of the frog's mouth. The slime immediately decks the frog right across the face. Rule number 1, you do not eat a teammate. The bee's durability had already tanked to 70%, and the slime tries to comfort her, telling her it's all good. Anyway, with that drama handled, the slime thinks the team composition is pretty solid. Now, the crab is the tank. The pufferfish is the range DPS, looking like a total gangster with a cigarette in its mouth. The bee is the mage, and Froggy is the team's assassin. Our slime, of course, is the commander-in-chief. The whole crew is geared up and ready for the epic showdown against that bird. The giant beast makes a move on the mage bee, and the slime barks an order for the crab to use its shell defense. When the blow lands, the crab manages to block it, but its shell gets seriously worn down, and its health takes a nosedive. Still, the slime tells it not to even sweat it because he's got a fix, and he starts channeling a healing spell on the crab. The slime then says it's time for the mage and the shooter to shine, telling them to unload with everything they've got. The two of them launch a coordinated assault on the monster, dealing a respectable amount of damage. The slime notes that the monster's fur is super thick, and the bee and pufferfish can only hold it off for a second, so he gives the signal for the frog to go in. Froggy goes full-on assassin mode, landing a critical strike on the monster's eye and severely weakening it. The slime says, "Now's not the time to get hyped," and orders everyone to attack in unison. All his minions then charge head-on at the massive creature, and in his mind's eye, he can already see the monster defeated. But snapping back to the present, he says, "The time for delays is over. The real training starts now." The scene then cuts to the outskirts of the swamp, where a level 9 jumping rat gets instantly murked by a level 21 stone cat. But the cat's victory is short-lived, because a level 35 swamp mosquito swoops in and drains it completely dry. As the mosquito buzzes off toward the water to lay its eggs for the fish, it gets zapped out of the sky by another creature that kills it instantly, a level 44 electric catfish. Our slime is stunned, saying that after that crazy snake bird, he's seeing yet another monster on that level. The catfish then evolves right before his eyes into a level 52 thunder catfish, leaving trails of crackling lightning in its wake. The slime can't believe what he's seeing. It seems like monsters around here are constantly evolving. He decides he needs to pull up the lore on this place and starts digging through the regional records. The ecological classification for this area is S rank, and it's listed as one of the regions with the wildest variety of monsters. Turns out a huge number of high-level monsters once lived here, and because of that, evolution is just a common everyday thing. The power rankings were stacked from cannon fodder and mid-tier threats, all the way up to advanced beasts and even god-tier king-level monsters. The last big throwdown targeted the regional tyrant Catuella, a beast who rallied every high-level monster in the zone, and the lion's share of the mid-tiers to jump the main character gone. The final score, a complete wipeout of the monster army, leaving the local ecosystem shattered. After the dust settled from that war, the environment kicked into a full-on recovery mode. The breakdown was simple. The land was soaking up immense magical energy, fueling a total rebirth of the natural order. As the ecosystem gradually rebuilt itself, the monsters kicked off their own evolutionary arms race. The system pinged with an update. The mid-tier monsters who survived the purge were now the biggest winners, basically hitting the jackpot from all this magical energy, a classic case of thriving when all your rivals have been wiped out. They were gobbling up resources, getting ready to cash them in for a first-class ticket to the next evolutionary stage. Leading the pack was a level 89 feathered serpent dragon, and right behind was that level 52 thunder catfish our slime just ran into. The system even pointed out that sheer luck could let some bottom-tier creature rocket to the top, so the outcome was a total wildcard. The only guarantee was this: the entire food chain in this territory was about to be rewritten from scratch. Every monster was now in the race, all desperately clawing their way up to seize the title of the one true king. And our slime was just stunned to see his encyclopedia was suddenly fully loaded. That database gone handed him. It wasn't just handy, it was a freaking cheat code. His mind started racing. Could his own puppet monsters actually evolve too? He noted that the sparky fish was only a single level beneath him. So why, he wondered, did that catfish feel way more dangerous? And once again, the system chimed in with a crucial reminder: your level isn't the final word on strength, because a ton of other factors are in play. Your species, racial perks, and any unlocked magic. Even a level 100 rat is just an appetizer for a baby dragon. Suddenly, the slime spots a commotion. The thunder catfish is locked in a desperate struggle. Curiosity piqued, he rolls closer. The ringside view reveals an epic showdown, a monstrous crocodile versus the thunder catfish. This level 60 croc is a beast, and with a horrifying crunch of its jaws, it shreds the catfish. But this was no clean victory. It was a mutual takedown. The catfish was torn in two, while the crocodile was scorched black by a final desperate attack. Parasitizing these two was off the table, he figured. But as he slid down to investigate, a massive jolt of electricity zapped him, vaporizing a huge chunk of his HP. He grumbles about needing a ridiculous 115 honey potions just to patch himself up. Undeterred, he moves to devour the catfish. But the system throws up a massive warning: nutritional overload. He's just absorbed 50,000 hit points worth of pure energy. His body can only handle 4,000, and he's on a 1-hour timer before he basically implodes. Just then, the system kicks in. A new protocol: decompose. This new ability lets him rack up insane EXP from consumption, And as a bonus, he even unlocks a lightning resistance skill. Still, the clock was ticking, and he had to move fast. Now supercharged, he tears through the swamp. He becomes a living wrecking ball, plowing through trees like they're nothing. He's having the time of his life, and his experience points are blasting through the roof. That's when he spots it. Across the water, a mangrove forest stands far denser and more menacing than his current playground. He knows what that means: bigger, badder monsters. He decides to check it out, but the moment he touches the water, he's swarmed. A frenzy of level 19 piranhas descends upon him, tearing him apart. His health starts draining at 40 points a second. In moments, he's already down over 1,000 hit points. He desperately activates his Devour ability, trying to heal by eating his attackers, but the math just ain't mathin'. He's gaining 80 HP for every 100 he loses a losing battle. To make matters worse, the water is slowing him down, making him an easy, gelatinous target. They're draining him faster than he can regenerate. And of course, now is when the system decides to give him a lecture on how swarm monsters are more dangerous. It's like the difference between one wasp and an entire nest, it explains. Overfeeding would also just make him a bigger, juicier target. He's literally being eaten alive, and he could not care less about this impromptu biology lesson. In a last-ditch effort, he jettisons a massive part of his body, sacrificing a staggering 20,000 HP to escape. He immediately wonders if he can just get that energy back by chugging more honey. The system confirms it's possible, but there's a catch. The timer on his power-up won't reset. He's only got 20 minutes left. So it's back to the grind, plowing through the swampland. He thought the landscape was getting repetitive, but the flora here is on hypergrowth, fueled by some crazy magic that still amazes him. And that's when a wild idea sparks. From a certain point of view, he thinks wiping out the entire papacy might not be so hard. Sure, a fungus doesn't have a dragon's breath, or the claws of a magical beast, but its true power lies in its infinite, unstoppable growth. For him, the path forward is simple: obliterate monsters. With infinite decomposition, absorption, and evolution, he has no limits. If he just keeps consuming day in and day out, he figures in about a month he could make the entire church feel the terror of being swarmed by an endless slime tide. However, the system immediately shuts that plan down. He asks why. It lays out the harsh reality: as his level climbs, the EXP he gets from low-level fodder plummets. The system breaks down the brutal math. A 10-level gap means 60% EXP, 20 levels, 36%, 50 levels, a pathetic 7.7%, and if he's 100 levels higher, he'll only get a measly 0.6%. The slime already had a hunch since his experience points were climbing, but his level wasn't budging. Eventually, his gains flatlined completely. He demands to know if the system can just show him the raw experience numbers. The system's response: not possible. Apparently, it would take too much processing power. Just then, his nutritional overload buff expires, and the requirements to trigger it again have just multiplied by 5. Suddenly, all the items he consumed start spilling out of his body. The slime has to admit the system is getting way smarter. It's annoying, but he just tells it to get the purge over with. In a bizarre spectacle, everything he ate gets ejected, from skeletons to whole monster carcasses. The slime realizes that to get stronger, he has to hunt bigger game. As the sun dips below the horizon, he sees the tide begin to recede. Pushing forward, his mind races with the possibilities of what creatures he might face next, even as the sticky, annoying mud clings to his body.